We're here in the studio with Anne-Claire Legendre, who's a spokesperson for the French Foreign Ministry. A very warm welcome to you, and thank you for coming to see us.
Thank you, Tom.
Let's begin with the case of Benjamin Brière. We just heard his sister there appealing there to the French government to do something to help secure his release. What's your message to her?
I mean, we are in very close touch with the family, and we've been in touch with them since the beginning of the situation that Benjamin Brière is facing, and on the decision made by and the condemnation made by the Iranians, it has absolutely no grounds. This is completely unacceptable, and of course we will continue being completely mobilized to find a positive issue to this situation.
So Benjamin Brière is clearly not a spy, is he?
There's no ground. It's it's a ridiculous condemnation on the base that has no justification. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for responding to that. Let's look at another story. The top headline on this channel for several weeks now has been the situation on the border between Ukraine and Russia. Now, today in Paris, these talks just wrapped up in the last hour or so, in fact, under the so-called Normandy format. What emerged from those talks?
So I think it's important signal, and that President Macron said yesterday that we were looking for all ways to de-escalate the situation and a signal of de-escalation. And I think with this discussion that lasted, as you said, very long time, more than 8 hours of discussion in this format that we couldn't manage to get together since 2019, we finally had a communiqué, and this is the first communiqué in the Normandy format since 2019 as well. And if you look at what is stated in this communiqué, they managed to agree on several points. Of course, there's still a lot of differences, but they managed to agree on the fact that the Minsk agreement are still relevant to the discussion. This is the first point, that the ceasefire should be absolutely respected, and that's a very important part. And the last one is there is a second meeting that is planned in Berlin in a couple of weeks. So this is already a path, and we hope out of this, that this could lead to the de-escalation that we are all looking for.
Yeah, and just looking at the time frame, that meeting in Berlin in 2 weeks from now, it's somewhat reassuring, isn't it, that there is still room and we're still talking about diplomacy even in 2 weeks from now, because some people thought perhaps the reception of that letter that the US ambassador took to the foreign ministry in Moscow would basically be the beginning of some more conflictual situation. It doesn't appear that's going to be quite as rapid as we might have feared.
But as you know, there are several discussions ongoing. So the letter that was replied to the Russians by the Americans is one thing that was actually intensely discussed with also European partners. But there's a second letter in the NATO format that is also being discussed in the framework of the alliance. And we have also discussion ongoing in the OSCE. So we are looking at pushing forward all these different diplomatic ways in order to de-escalate a situation which is heavily tense, and I want to underline how much serious is the situation.
And of course, President Macron is geographically closer to Moscow than the US president. He's also been president for longer than the US president, and he's presumably forged a working relationship with President Vladimir Putin. Now, they're going to speak on the telephone on Friday.
Absolutely.
And I'm just wondering whether what perhaps President Macron might achieve that perhaps other leaders can't achieve. Does he have a relationship with the Russian president that he can perhaps use leverage on?
You might remember that Emmanuel Macron was one of the first leaders pushing for a re-engagement with Russia on the basis that we need to have this discussion for the sake of European security. And today we see that it's very clearly the case. So we need to have this discussion. Emmanuel Macron has, had the occasion to continue this discussion, a very frank discussion with Vladimir Putin. It's not for me to disclose the discussion that will take place on Friday, but obviously we will push on all these different aspects of the discussions. And I want to remind that this comes in a framework where we've been very clear and very unanimous in the European Union, but also with our allies in NATO, in order to say and state very clearly that there would be massive consequences and a very heavily price to pay for Russia if they were to, take any action against Ukrainian integrity.
I'd like to ask for your reaction to a tweet I saw in the last 24 hours from the Russian chess player Garry Kasparov, who is a sworn enemy of the Russian president and constantly trying to predict his next move as a chess player, which makes his input quite interesting. He says that President Putin's been plotting to take back territory lost in the Soviet Union from the very beginning. And it does look a lot like that's exactly what he's doing, and not just with the example of Ukraine. Doesn't it?
I think, we had the 2014 crisis. So unfortunately, we have already a precedent that can, we can learn the lesson from. And I think what we learned from is that we need to be united. And that's the message that's been sent very clearly. And I think you can take it back in December when the G7 and then the European Council stated very clearly what kind of massive consequences Russia would face in case of action against Ukraine. So I think what we learned from our precedent history is that we need to be very cohesive in the response we give to the Russian, and I think that's what we see today. That's what Emmanuel Macron and Olaf Scholz yesterday demonstrated very clearly in Berlin.
Yeah, we could talk about Ukraine for hours. There's been so many developments, not least I'm just hearing now Turkey offering to broker peace and host Ukraine and Russia at talks in Ankara. So lots happening. But let's move on to another story, which we've been keeping a very close eye on and which France is very concerned about as well. Developments in Mali and Burkina Faso. Now, those are two countries that are key players in the battle against jihadists in the Sahel region of North Africa. Both are now military regimes. Both of them now have a junta in position. What's France's strategy? Because when you look at Burkina Faso, which is the more recent convert to a military regime, France calling for the return of President Kaboré. I mean, that's not what the people of Burkina Faso seem to want, is it?
I think what we say is the liberation of President Kaboré, which is being restrained at the moment by the putschists. So we need to see a return to constitutional order, and the situation has been condemned by the international community at large, the UN Secretary General, the African Union, the Western African community, and you know that the Western African community will set an extraordinary summit on Friday in order to discuss the situation, and so we will know more about how they want to face and address this situation. So I think we have two different situations, but in front of the evolving situation on the ground, we still consider with our European partner and our African partner that we need to keep being engaged in the fight against terrorism, because that's the mandate we've been given, a very clear mandate, and that's also a need for European security as well.
And there's, of course, a Russian dynamic to this as well, which is that there are Russian mercenaries on the ground in the Sahel region. They might say at the invitation of the Malian military authorities. People will be wondering, why not just leave it to the Russian mercenaries to do something that's a dangerous and not particularly desirable job, namely trying to rid the area of dangerous jihadist fighters?
Because if you look at the legacy of this private mercenary society, Wagner, in other theaters, and mainly in Central Africa, you can see that they haven't solved in any way the terrorist issue. On the contrary, they have actually unraveled the situation. So you have now in Central Africa an issue of sovereignty with this private society actually, using resources from Central Africa in order to pay their own mercenaries, And this is what we're seeing at the moment happening in Mali with some researchers coming and looking into the mine resources of Mali in order to pay the mercenary. So should I underline that the international community and the huge involvement of the international community, because you're mentioning French troops, but you have also European troops. You have, the MINUSMA, which is the UN force, which is composed of 20,000 troops, and all of them are for free for Mali, and they are actually doing the job of trying to keep the stability and fight against terrorism on the ground, which is not the case of Wagner.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm afraid, Amito, we're out of time, but thank you for taking the time to talk to us about all of those issues. Anne-Claire Legendre, spokesperson for the French Foreign Ministry. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your invitation.
Thank you.